Hey people, Pub here from Global Conflicts, and today I'm going to be showing you a quick video on how to set up Headless Client / Pizza AI for your Global Conflicts mission. So setting up Headless Client for your mission may seem quite daunting and confusing, but it's actually a relatively straightforward process once you know how to do it. My first time setting it up, I was the exact same, and quite frankly, after I'd done it the first time, I've never had to look at a tutorial again. So let's get into it, shall we? I highly suggest you start off with a blank mission, meaning there's no AI currently in your mission. Just for all intents and purposes, it helps to alleviate any potential future issues. So I highly suggest you start with a blank mission, and then when you install your headless client, followed by adding the AI after that. So let's say you've gone into a scenario, you've saved the mission as a certain name. What you want to do from there is you want to go into Documents, Armor Free, Missions, into your mission name. You want to go into the module folder. And in your module folder, you want to make sure you got the headless _ AI module, and in the modules file .sqf, you have this line. What this does is it simply mounts the headless client onto the framework. Once you've got that line installed, and you've got headless client or headless _ AI folder currently present within your module folder, your first part of your setup is done. Now we're going to move on to the in-game stuff. So setting up headless client in-game is as simple as pie. What you do is you go over here to the F5 tab, or i.e. the Systems tab. You go down into the Logic Entities, and you want to find a game logic, but there's two of them. You want to make sure you get the one with the I. Then you want to go up here and you want to search Head, and you want to find the Headless Client module and place that as well. Go into your Headless Client module, and in the variable name it Headless Client. Oh, my bad. And then down here in the role description, headless client. Untick the player box, but make sure you retick the playable box. Click OK. Go into your game logic. In the variable name, type in HC_spawn. Voila! The second process of headless client is now set up. So now that we've connected up your headless clients and whatnot, what we want to do is start adding AI to your mission. So you'll see here I have two examples. I have a large squad over here and I have a smaller squad over here. And we also have two game logics now. We have this one here that says HC_spawn, and this one here that's called QRF. Now, as you can guess, this is probably going to be the quick reaction force that will come later, while this will be the initial unit composite that spawns past briefing. Once we go in game and we're able to interact with each other and move around and shoot, once we're past that initialization, any units that are currently connected to the HC_spawn game logic will spawn in game once we go in. Anything connected to other game logics, such as this game logic of QRF, variable name QRF, will spawn later once that logic is called, and we'll get onto that in a wee bit on how to call QRFs. But let's stick to the initial units that spawn once we go in game. So what we do is, you got your game logic _HC spawn. You want to place down your unit, make sure all units within that composite are selected. Right click on the unit, not the unit composite. Go to connect, sync to, and as denoted by all these blue lines, anything that has a blue line will be synced to whatever you click on. And for this purpose, we're going to click on game logic HC_spawn. Now, when we go in game, if we're in a multiplayer environment and headless client is within his slot in the role selection screen, which only an admin will be able to see, anything that is connected, any vehicles, any AI or turrets or such that are connected to the HC_spawn will spawn in game with us. Now, if we wanted an AI to spawn on a weapon, we would place the weapon down, we would right click on the weapon itself, sync the weapon to HC_spawn, but then we will also have to sync the unit. So what you do is you make sure you sync the unit that is attached to the gun, also to the HC_spawn. So if you want a turret with a unit attached to that turret to spawn at the mission start, then make sure you sync the turret and the unit. The same goes for enemy vehicles. If you have an enemy that is inside a vehicle at the mission start, when we all go in game, make sure the vehicle and the units inside are also connected to the HC_spawn game logic. If for future reference, if for the future that you wanted to do a QRF, the exact same thing can be achieved, but simply by editing a single line of code in the headless underscore AI module within your framework. And that's exactly what we're going to get onto now. So after connecting all your AI and such to different game logics in game, what you're going to want to do is you want to back out to your folder. You want to go into modules, and then you want to go into the headless client or the headless underscore AI module. Go down to the settings.sqf file, and in here you're going to start to find different settings that you can adjust to affect your AI in various different ways. Now, what you want to do is you want to make sure that this array down here, this initial spawn, is always HC underscore spawn. You never want to change that. But let's say you wanted to add those QRFs that I mentioned, or a patrol that spawn later on in the game, seeing as they're connected to a different game logic other than the HC underscore spawn. So we always make sure the full array of logics in game that the headless intends to use are in this object array up here. So what we do is we make sure HG underscore spawn is in both boxes here and here, but in the initial first box we do colon, quotation mark, QRF, quotation mark, done. That's it. We've now added the second logic to our array, and now headless client can call that at a later date. You also have various other things in here, all documented on how they spawn. So you can have random spawns, and certain QRFs will spawn more favorably over other QRFs. You can read all about that in the settings file here. You can adjust the AI and other times of day. When you go in game and you are finally pushing your mission onto the public server where anyone can play it at any time, you want to make sure you've got all of these settings here highlighted disabled. When you are pushing your mission to the final version V1 for multiplayer use, you want to make sure all of these settings here listed are are put to false. Otherwise you're going to have some serious performance issues in game. While testing, feel free to have them on. It's very useful. It will allow you to understand what your AI are doing and what commands are currently being processed. But like I said, when it goes to final, make sure this is disabled, otherwise you're going to have massive issues. So once you install your headless client module in your folder, HC underscore spawn will always be in the array initially. So anything that you connect to the HC underscore spawn game logic will always be initially spawned. You will never have to add any extra QRF variables to the array or such, as HC underscore spawn will always be there. So you can guarantee that these units that you connect to HC underscore spawn will always be there without having to edit any settings. But onto that note of QRFs. We've added the QRF into the array in our settings folder, settings file. So now what we want to do is we actually want to make them spawn. So as you can see, our QRF is connected to our QRF logic. And then what we do is we want to go into a trigger. And we want to make sure it's activation. Well, you can choose whatever activation you want, but for this example, we're going to go down to independent. Activation type present, so that means if independent is present within this trigger zone, activate it only on the server. You want to make sure that happens, otherwise every single client will spawn it individually, and that will cause massive performance issues. And then on the activation, you want to paste this QRF call pizza AI spawn array. What this will do is it will call that QRF that we listed in that array once we enter this zone, and it should in theory spawn these AI. So you may be wondering, why is there a vehicle over there? That wasn't on the last scene. Well, this is to prove the point. Over here to our front now, you should see our initial HC underscore spawn units. But you're not going to see that because I'm in a multiplayer environment within the editor, and I do not have the headless client actually loaded into his slot yet. So these units won't spawn until we go into a multiplayer environment with headless client loaded. This is a multiplayer environment without headless client loaded, hence why you cannot see any of our headless client spawns, only the stuff that isn't connected to the headless client. And also our trigger will not activate, as compared to when we go into a multiplayer environment with headless client loaded. So now we're in a multiplayer environment with headless client loaded. We're currently on the GC test server, and as you can see, I'm logged in as an admin, and as such, I can see any virtual entities that are currently within the server. And one of those virtual entities is our headless client, as you can see, and he's currently in his slot. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in game. I'm going to test out our trigger and the HC underscore spawn. So we're about to go in game, so let's continue. And there you go. As you see, our units that are not connected to Headless Client, our units that are connected to Headless Client, including the turret and the man who's, well, gunning it. And now we're going to test out our trigger. As you see, the QRF spawns. And this unit and that unit are now mounted on a Headless Client, while this one isn't mounted on a Headless Client. So that's it. Very simple. If you have any questions, concerns, suggestions, comments, anything like that, feel free to message me or one of the mission makers over in the mission making channel on our Discord, and we'll be sure to help you as much as we can. Once again, any questions, feel free to ask.